had jurisdiction over the matter. If I decided that it was.
You wouldn't issue an order if you didn't have jurisdiction. It's a yes or no question. Would you expect him to obey it?
I would expect all parties to obey my orders, no matter who they are.
Date ever spoken to Senators Moody or Scott about the possibility of being considered for a judicial vacancy?
I had talked a few years ago with Senator Scott because Senator Scott, during the last administration, had me on his list. And
hey, Patriots, welcome back to the channel. If you love America, the Constitution, and the truth, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Today, we're diving into a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing that really shows you everything that's wrong with the left's approach to our courts and how they want to intimidate judges and twist the law for their own political games. Let's break it down.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Arto, if the Secretary of Defense were sued in your courtroom as a district court judge, if you are confirmed, and you issued an order, would you expect him to obey it?
if I had jurisdiction over the matter, if I decided that it was.
You wouldn't issue an order if you didn't have jurisdiction. It's a yes or no question. Would you expect him to obey it?
I would expect all parties to obey my orders, no matter who they are.
Because an order is an order, as you just said, correct? So the Secretary of Defense ought to obey a district court order. How about you, Mr. Dudek? What do you think? Judge Dudek.
Yeah, I would, I would expect, as Judge Arttow said, all parties before me to follow my orders pending any
including
appeal.
The Secretary of Defense or any other cabinet secretary, correct?
Any party that appeared before me outside of a stay or an appeal, yes, I would expect that.
Judge Pratt?
I'd give the same answer as my friends.
Judge Moe?
Same.
Judge Arttow, as you know, the president sued the Pulitzer Prize Board for defamation and conspiracy based on their awarding of a prize to journalists who reported on the Trump-Russia collusion during the 2016 election. You're familiar with that lawsuit, correct?
Yes.
You sat on the court that dismissed it.
I sat on a court that found jurisdiction, on a three-judge panel that found jurisdiction.
And you wrote a concurrence where you took a somewhat less measured approach. You essentially parroted the litigant, Trump's talking points, incorrectly calling the Russia story, quote, now debunked allegations, end quote, and you called into question the seminal Supreme Court decision in New York Times versus Sullivan, a landmark case protecting free speech and freedom of the press. Given that concurrence and the false information that you included in it, should litigants have any expectation that you can be unbiased, especially if the federal government is involved as a party?
Senator, I've been a judge. I've been a judge for 11 years. Nobody's ever questioned my integrity. With regard to, I know that what you're getting at in terms of the issue, but I had no communications or expectation that I was even under consideration by the White House when I issued that opinion. And I followed the canons. I followed the canon 3, which is the one that applies in Florida, very carefully. It requires me to take cases as they come.
Let me just ask you, because my time is limited.
Okay.
That court ruling was issued on February 12th of this year, correct?
Correct.
Had you, before that date, ever spoken to Senators Moody or Scott about the possibility of being considered for a judicial vacancy?
I had talked a few years ago with Senator Scott because Senator Scott, during the last administration, had me on his list, and his general counsel is a friend of mine. And when I came into town in November to attend the Federal Society, I just basically paid him a courtesy visit like I do every year because he's a close friend from Palm Beach County, where he used to work as an assistant state attorney. I had no expectations of anything other than the fact that I knew Senator Scott had me in high regard.
So the answer is yes. You had spoken to Senator Scott through his staff about the possibility of a judicial vacancy.
For the last several years.
Repeatedly, you had discussed with Senator Scott's staff the possibility of a judicial.
I was aware that they considered me in high regard, and that if there was an opportunity that they might consider me for it, I was asked if I had any interest in it, and I had indicated that I did. But of course, Senator Scott did not have a case before me, and I was not communicating with the White House or anybody else. Had the timing been differently, then I may have handled it differently.
Why didn't you recuse yourself from a case involving the president when you had spoken to Senator Scott's staff about the possibility of a judicial vacancy that would involve an appointment by the president who was a litigant?
Because Canon 3B requires that a judge hear and decide matters assigned to the judge, except if the disqualification is required by 3E, and 3E has only 4 different bases that could possibly apply to me: personal bias or prejudice. I didn't have any personal bias or prejudice in the case. I did not serve as a lower court judge, and I had no economic interest in the subject controversy itself.
That canon 20 times, but the fact is that you had spoken to Senator Scott's office about the possibility of a judicial vacancy, knowing that Senator Scott would hear about it, and then sat on the case. Let me just ask you.
I had done that when Joe Biden was president, and that's the timing that we're talking about. I can't indefinitely not take cases because of the fact that I might have aspirations for higher office. That's not the way it works in terms of the canons.
And Senator Blumenthal, your time has run. Did you have one more quick question? Go ahead.
I have one more question. Had you spoken to anyone else, including Senator Moody, about the possibility of a judicial appointment at the federal bench?
I never spoke with Senator Moody. I never spoke with Senator Moody.
Or anyone else?
Senator, I think I passed on. I think Senator Scott passed on my resume, perhaps, and I indicated that I'm available if they have any questions. But I did not hear back from Senator Moody's office because Senator Moody was just coming into transition at the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
So what happened? Senator Blumenthal, your classic left-wing Democrat, decided to grandstand and grill a panel of judicial nominees, including Judge Artto, Judge Dudek, and Judge Pratt. Now, you might think the Senate is supposed to ask tough questions to make sure our judges are qualified, and I agree. But what Blumenthal did was pure political theater. First, he asked if the Secretary of Defense or any cabinet official should obey a federal judge's order. Now, folks, this is basic civics. Of course, in America, nobody is above the law. That's what makes our country special. Every nominee gave the obvious answer. Yes, even the Secretary of Defense has to obey a court order. That was just Blumenthal trying to play gotcha, as if he could catch a Trump appointee, saying they'd let the president or his cabinet ignore the courts. Didn't happen. Another swing and a miss. But then Blumenthal goes full attack mode on Judge Arttow. Why? Because Judge Arttow sat on a panel that dismissed President Trump's lawsuit against the Pulitzer board. Here's the thing. Trump sued for defamation and conspiracy after the Pulitzer board gave awards to journalists who pushed the Russia collusion hoax. Let's be real. Most of us now know that story was built on lies and Democrat opposition research. The American people were sold a bill of goods for years. Judge Arttow wrote a concurrence, his own separate opinion, saying the Russia allegations were now debunked. And Blumenthal goes nuts, accusing Arto of parroting Trump's talking points and even daring to question New York Times versus Sullivan, the 1964 Supreme Court decision that basically give media companies a free pass to slander public figures. Let me tell you, folks, Sullivan is long overdue for a revisit. The corporate media can smear anyone on the right with impunity, and judges like Arto are finally starting to call out. That's why the left is so scared. Here's where it gets really ridiculous. Blumenthal tries to manufacture a scandal because Judge Artto had, in the past, talked with Senator Rick Scott's staff about possible judicial appointments. Let me ask you, who doesn't network in their profession? This is Washington. Everybody talks to everybody. And Arto made it clear. He never talked to the White House, never had any pending case involving Senator Scott, and followed the judicial canons to the letter. He explained it perfectly. Judges are required to hear assigned cases unless there's a real conflict of interest. The rules are crystal clear. Unless there's personal bias, prior involvement as a lower court judge, or a financial stake, you do your job. That's what Judge Artto did. But Blumenthal wants to create a conspiracy where there is none. Why didn't you recuse yourself from a Trump case? Well, because the rules didn't require it. The left wants to set a precedent. If you're a conservative, if you've ever talked to a Republican, you should have to sit out every case that matters. That's not how the system works, and we shouldn't let them change it. Let's be honest about what's going on here. The left is terrified that judges like Arto are waking up to their tricks. They want to keep the courts as a safe space for the liberal media and the Democrat machine. They want to intimidate anyone who asks tough questions about media bias or the weaponization of defamation law. And they want to punish anyone who thinks for themselves, like Judge Artto. That's why they're trying to make an example out of him. Because he dared to say what millions of Americans already know. The Russia collusion hoax was a disgrace, and the media should be held accountable. So here's my opinion. As a proud American and a patriot, judges should apply the law fairly. Judge Artto did that. The left's obsession with Russia and Trump is a distraction from their own failures. The corporate media is not above the law or the truth. Judicial independence means judges don't cave to political pressure from the left or the right. The real scandal here isn't Judge Artto. It's the Democrats' attempt to bully and smear anyone who won't play by their rules. We saw it with Kavanaugh, we saw it with Barrett, and now we're seeing it with a whole new generation of judges. If we want to save this country, we have to stand up for honest judges and for the rule of law, not the rule of leftist outrage. Thanks for watching, Patriots. If you agree we need more judges who stand up for the Constitution and less political grandstanding in the Senate, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Let me know what you think in the comments. Should judges recuse themselves just because they talk to senators? Should the media be held to account for spreading lies? I want to hear from you. Until next time, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.